Hello everyone, I thought I'd just pop on and do a quick live. I had a card that I wanted to make. As before, just getting myself all set up so I can see what's going on. Oh, just need to turn the volume down on my tablet, otherwise you're going to hear that. You're going to hear me twice and that would be quite off-putting. Okay, sorry I've got a little bit of glare on the lights. I'll move the stamp set out of the way and that should help. Because if we're just looking down on paper, then it shouldn't be too bad at all. Right, so I wanted to make a card this evening with the Petal palette stamp set. This is a stamp set that will be retiring at the end of the current catalogue. I'm hoping that's now reducing the glare a little bit for you. I'm sure I'll get all this lighting thing sorted out soon. So I had a little idea about a little bit of watercolour playing that I might like to do with this stamp set and a little bit of die cutting and things. So I'm just going to go ahead and crack on with that now. So all of the supplies that I'm using to make this card are available in my online shop, and you can reach that by clicking on the Shop Now button at the top of my page. Okay, so to start with, to create this card, and this is just an idea at the moment, I haven't actually done a completed version. I'm going to start off with a small piece of watercolour card, and this piece of watercolour card is just big enough to take the lovely rose and leaf image stamp from the set. I want to do a little bit of smooshing, so I'm going to get myself a slick surface to play on. So I've just got one of the a page protector here from the kind of thing you use to keep documents in. Now the way I'm going to colour up my cardstock is I'm going to use some of our re-inkers. Now these little bottles of ink are awesome. You can do lots and lots of different techniques with them. They're not just for refilling our ink pads. We can also refill our Stampin' Right markers with them, but we can do lots and lots of lovely techniques, and we can watercolour with them. So I'm just going to have a little mess around with them this evening. So I'm going to use two colours from the Subtles collection. I've got Petal Pink and So Saffron, and I'm just going to drop a few drops of each of the colours onto my slick surface. Well, that one's a bit splatty. And I've got a little water bottle here, and I'm just going to add some water onto those inks to get them to move a little bit. Ooh, quite a bit of water. And I think I might just, for good measure, put a little bit of water onto my watercolour paper as well. So I'm just going to now kind of tap and pick up the ink from this water palette that I've got here. So we seem to have a little bit of an overrun of the yellow, but we can sort that out. I'm just going to go to one side a little bit now and dry this off with my heat tool, so apologies for the noise. If you've got your volume up loud, you may want to turn it down for a few seconds. Be right back. I hope that's not too loud. I've moved it away a little way. Okay, so I've dried that off a little bit. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to mop up. Now if you had another piece of cardstock, you wouldn't need to waste any of that ink, but just for speed purposes, I'm now going to go in with a little bit more of the Petal Pink, because it got a little bit overwhelmed with the So Saffron. Who knew that colour could be so strong? So I'm going to add some water now to get that Petal Pink ink moving again, and I'm just going to go back in with my watercolour panel just to add a little bit more of the pinky colour. And you know what, I think I may even add a slightly stronger pinky colour, or an orangey colour, with our Calypso Coral ink. This is another ink from our Subtles collection. I'm not quite sure how this is going to work out, so I'll just put a couple of little drops there. Again, going to add some more water to get that moving, and tentatively tap in there. Oh, okay. Oh yes, that's really rather nice. Yes, quite happy with how that's worked out. So I think I'm actually going to leave that there. and I'm going to go off to one side again and get that dry. So once again, apologies for the noise. I'll be right back. If you're just joining me, I'm just off to one side drying a piece of watercolour cardstock at the moment that I've inked using some of our re-inkers from the Subtles collection. I used Petal Pink, So Saffron, and then it went in at the last minute with a bit of Calypso Coral because I needed a little bit more brightness. So I'm just drying off that cardstock now thoroughly because I actually want to heat emboss the big rose image from the Petal palette set over the top. So I think that's probably going to be enough, and I'm just going to mop up that excess ink again. Again, if you had a bit more time on your hands, get another piece of cardstock and mop up that ink. There's no need to waste it. Okay, so just going to put my re-inkers away before I end up knocking them over and making a right mess where I don't want to make a mess. Okay, so that's them out of the way. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to heat emboss in white this image. Now, heat embossing is a really lovely technique if you haven't done it before. Hi Vicky, nice to see you. Hello. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take our embossing buddy. Now this is a little bag full of anti-static powder, and it'll also help absorb any little pieces of moisture that I may have lurking still on my wet paper. And we're going to use embossing powder. Now, Stampin' Emboss powder comes in lots of different colours, and you can see those on the website. I'm going to use white today. Embossing powder is basically like a ground up plastic. We need to use a sticky ink to make it stick to our surface, whether that be cardstock or vellum or paper. And then we need to apply some heat to it to actually make it melt, and it gives us a really lovely finished effect. So I've applied my embossing buddy to get rid of moisture and static. I'm now going to use my Versamark sticky ink pad to generously apply ink to the stamp that I wish to stamp. So I'm going over and over and over and over, make sure I've got plenty on there. And now I'm going to apply this to my watercoloured panel. I think I'll go sort of pick which bit you want, but I think I'd like to get a bit of that strong colour, but some of these variations of colours too. I'm going to press that down, and because I'm going onto watercolour paper, I'm going to give it a really nice firm bit of pressure, because watercolour paper is quite textured and you want to make sure you're getting a really, really firm image. Okay, so maybe quite difficult to see. In person I can see that there's a little bit of something gone on there. So now what I'm going to do is I like to just use a coffee filter to catch my stray powder. I'm going to tip the powder over the cardstock, tap off the excess, and we can now see that we have got that stamped image covered in white powder. I'm going to tidy up the white powder back into my pot and put the lid on before I make a mess. And pop that to one side. And now again, apologies, but I'm going to need to get the heat gun on this to melt it. And I'm going to do it a bit closer to the camera this time so that you can see it. So turn your volume down if you don't want to be deafened. Okay, so here we go. Now the heat from the heat tool will start to melt the powder. And what I can see here, it's turning from like a dull white to a nice bright shiny white as I move it over it. Now, you don't need to waft your heat gun around like this. The most effective way for heat embossing is actually to hold it in one place, wait for the powder to start to melt, and then slowly move it around your image until everything is melted. I hope you actually heard all that. Vicky said now she's going to have to order the white embossing powder. Yeah, good idea, Vicky. It's really useful stuff. Lots of useful sort of emboss resist techniques and things we can do with it too, but more on that maybe another time. Now, what I want to do, I have got this idea in my head that I want to build up my card on this Sahara sand base. So I'm going to want my stamped image on there. I'm going to want to die cut some other bits and pieces as well, and I also perhaps want a bit of subtle background stamping. So what I need to do now is die cut out a couple of things. So there are coordinating dies that also go with this stamp set, and they are called, bear with me a second, they're called the Petals and More Thinlit dies. Now, so what I'm going to do, and I'll do this off camera because I don't want to make the camera wobble, I'm going to line up that die around my image and I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine. I will be right back. I'm using my, I'll just show you here, I'm using my magnetic platform to line up the die and to hold it in place for me. If you don't have a magnetic platform, you could use a bit of tape. And I'm just going to run this through my die cutting machine off camera. So there we go, I've now run that through. And there we have our lovely white embossed image that we've die cut through. I'll put that piece of watercolour paper to one side because you never know, I may be able to do something else with that. So that's that die finished now. So over to our card base. I think I'm going to do some tone on tone stamping in the background before I place my flower on and the other bits and pieces I think that might work with this design. So I'm going to use my Sahara Sand ink pad, and I'm going to use this nice sort of branch leafy image from the stamp set. I'm just going to stamp it onto my grid paper first because I'm not quite sure how strong I want it to stamp, but I think I'd quite like the second generation of ink because I want it to be quite pale. So I think I'm going to put one there, and I'm going to pop another one about there, and we'll see how this works out. So I'll pop that to one side now. Okay, so let's layer up our rose image. So yes, that's looking quite nice, but there are some other dies in the set that I think I'd like to use. So this is one of the little dies that comes in the set, and it creates a really lovely border. And I was thinking I might actually cut that out of some Petal Pink cardstock and stick that underneath the rose. But I am wondering now if maybe Calypso Coral might work a little bit better, but I'll stick with the original idea. Now, because this is a really intricate die, I want to make life easy for myself when it comes to sticking it down. So I'm actually going to use some double-sided adhesive sheet on the back of my cardstock so that when I run it through, it'll stick straight down. So I peel off the backing paper, I stick my cardstock on there and then fold it off and burnish. And then I'm just going to get myself a pair of scissors, turn it over, and I'm just going to cut out this, oh excuse me, my tablets are playing me up again. I'm just going to try and see if I can find the live video again so that if there are any comments I can actually see them and respond to them. I think we're nearly there. Okay, and we're back. Right, so I'm now going to trim down this cardstock. And what I'm going to do is I'm also now going to run this through the die cutting machine. I think I'm going to risk it, but it may make the desk wobble a little bit. So I'll bring it over. So this is our die cutting machine. This one's called a Big Shot. There are lots and lots of different ones available. Now this is basically, it's like a mangle. It's like an old-fashioned mangle. It's got metal rollers in there, and it applies pressure to the dies so that when we roll it through, that die that actually isn't sharp to touch does cut through the paper or the cardstock that we're trying to cut. So I hope that wasn't too wobbly for you. So now, that's now cut that out, and I now want to remove that. So I've got this thing here called a die brush. Very, very handy for getting all these little bits and pieces out. Highly recommend getting yourselves one of these. So here's our pretty little die cut, and I'm just going to use the tip of my scissors just to get a couple of those little bits and pieces out that have remained stuck in there. I'll just scoop those little bits and pieces to one side. So now I'm going to, I think I might flip that grid paper over. It's a bit grubby on that side. So I've basically now turned this piece of cardstock into a sticker. So I can peel that back off and I don't have to worry about trying to get glue on all these little bits. Oh, thank you, Donna. That's really kind of you. Thank you for watching. I'm now going to pop this down on here as straight as I can. And oh yeah, actually I do quite like the way that's turned out. But I'd like this to be raised up a little bit, to have a little bit of dimension. So I'm going to use some of our stamping dimensionals. These are little pieces of double-sided foam adhesive that can help us add a bit of dimension to our projects. So I'm just going to peel the backs off those. You don't have to completely cover it. A few is good enough. Okay, so I now sort of need to decide. Oh, actually, I think I quite like it that way. Yeah, I'm going to go for that direction. But I think this card still needs a little bit more. So one of the other dies that's in the set is this lovely kind of spriggy leaf sort of die. And I think what I'd like to do is actually add that with some vellum cardstock. This is it's kind of like very thick tracing paper, but it adds just a lovely little something to sort of our card making projects. So I'm gonna try putting two pieces together and run those through my Big Shot so that I can get two of these through at the same time. So I'll just be right back with those. Sorry, you can hear all the crunching and clanking in the background. Okay, so well, that seems to have worked. Excellent. So I shall now remove the die and I shall carefully remove these lovely delicate leafy die cuts. Hang on, I've got a little pokey tool here. I don't know where my piercing tool and things are, or my tool-in one, everything's disappeared. But anyway, this will do the job. So there's one there, and I'm just going to poke out any extra little bits and pieces that are stuck in. Hope you're all having a lovely day. At least it was only a 4-day week this week after the bank holiday. And Friday tomorrow, yippee, another weekend. That'll do nicely. So that's one, and here's the other one. So I'm just going to carefully remove that from the vellum. Hopefully it's cut all the way through. If it hasn't, I may just change my original idea and just stick with the one. No, I think with a bit of teasing, I think this may well come out for me. Nearly there. Try not to tear it. Okay, so again, I'm just going to poke out these extra little bits and pieces that surplus to requirements. And we'll see how this little project ends up. So obviously I've done some watercolour smooshing today onto watercolour card using our ink refills. I just used certain colours, but we've got lots and lots and lots of colours to choose from. So it can be a really handy way of making a nice background. Oh, do you know what? I'm getting a bit bored now picking these out. Oh, take that one off there. Don't quite know what happened there. Anyway, so as you can see, these are really delicate something, and I'm going to get those poked in behind my flower there. I'm going to use a different type of adhesive this time. I'm going to use glue dots. Glue dots are really handy for adhering delicate little bits and pieces like this to our projects. So I've just popped a little glue dot on there, and I'm now going to, I perhaps shouldn't have stuck this down quite yet, carefully lift that up, and oh yeah, managed to pop that behind there. Does it need another one? Does it need a whole other one? I think maybe just a little bit more. So, oh hi Karen, thank you for joining me. Love the sprig. Oh, they are really, yes, the sprigs are really nice in vellum. I've just torn this one down a little bit, so I don't want to use quite so much for the next one. Okay, and I'm just going to tuck that under there. So I've added some nice sort of layers and textures there. I think I'm going to leave this card just there. I'm not going to add my sentiment just yet, because I'm not really sure what I may end up wanting it for, but there are lots of sentiments in this set to choose from. We've got a thank you and a best wishes, so really good all-rounders, as well as congratulations. Some things are just meant to be, like the two of you together. That's lovely. Life is so much better with you in it. Lovely for a partner or a friend. And you've got this lovely little dotty stamp down there, actually, which I think I need to use that. So I'm going to get that out, pop that on a block, and I'm going to get that Sahara Sand ink pad out again. Again, I'm going to stamp off because I don't want it really dark, but I don't want the full thing. I think just some little touches of it could be really quite nice. Yeah, I'm quite liking how that's working out. I think I'll go slightly wider there, slightly narrower there. I think we need something in this bottom corner as well now, maybe just another little spot there. And I think I'm actually going to leave that there. So thank you very much for those of you that have been watching, or either live or later on. Very much appreciated. Have a lovely Friday, and I may well see you live over the weekend at some point. Thank you. Bye.